baseball and the O's.
Welcome back, Birdland, to yet another episode of the Talkin Orioles baseball podcast. I have a very exciting one for you guys here today. This is going to be our gambling episode. This is going to be personally my favorite episode, or one of my favorite episodes, because I am a sports bettor. I've told you that in the past, and you'll continue to hear about this at times in the future. And I think as the show progresses and we get seasons and seasons deep into it, because frankly, I don't plan on going anywhere, gang. I plan on talking Baltimore Orioles baseball with you folks literally until I die, every single season. So this is going to be one of my favorite episodes every single year. And I really think the listeners and the viewers are going to become enamored with this show every year. They're going to look forward to this show every year. Not just because it's going to be right before the season begins, because I like everything playing itself out before we really put money on it. And how could you not be excited at a new season about to begin? I mean, it's one of the most exciting times of the year for me, especially when the Orioles are good like they are right now. Okay? And even more so, I think you're going to be excited because these are things that can win you money. These are things that hopefully will win me money. These are things that I personally am going to be betting on. Maybe not every single one that I touch here today, but certainly a good chunk of them I am going to have money on. And if nothing more, I put my reputation on the line when I go out and say these things. You know, before bad Orioles seasons, I wasn't out there screaming about their win totals and screaming about award winners and league leaders and the things that we're going to be touching on here today. But in good seasons, it's very true that, at least in recent years, the Orioles have been a great team to bet on. And if we go back to the stretch between, I want to say, 15 and 17, historically, that Orioles team was possibly the greatest, if not definitely one of the greatest teams to ever gamble on in that stretch. I remember Barstool put out a couple years ago this like bar graph that progressed through the 2000s and showing the most profitable teams. And usually the top teams had like a little bit of a margin, like a nice chunk, and certainly teams come up and down. And the Orioles weren't in there in the beginning, obviously, but once we got to that 2014-15 time, they jumped up to not only towards the top, but the top spot. And then during that stretch, the amount that they set different from the field, like the distance from them from the field, was so extreme that truly it was everything that I was preaching they would be. And along with that, you have to understand a little bit when it comes to gambling. Value is everything, right? And I'm not the smartest man when it comes to the number crunching and all of that. But when you see a team undervalued, there's going to be a lot of value naturally to take advantage of. And that was basically those Orioles in that span, especially when it came to betting them every single day, because they didn't have really that front end starter, that big name that everybody, would want to bet on, swaying the odds. So, for instance, when the Yankees are playing and they have Garrett Cole starting, they're going to be a very heavy favorite. Unless he's going up against one of the absolute other aces in the game, he's going to be an enormous favorite. So when you're betting a team every day, that's going to affect your number, because if you drop one of those games, you're going to have to win usually at least 2, if not 3, and possibly 4 games to make up the difference for that one loss. If you're betting a team every day, especially a team that's very good and viewed very good. So my favorite bet the last 2 seasons, right, has been the Orioles over win total. Okay, before we get to the games, I just want to give you a little backstory on at least the last couple years. And 2 years ago, if I remember correctly, it was set at 61.5, meaning that if the Orioles lost 100 games exactly or less, they would hit their over win total. And I was going around screaming that that was the easiest money to make, and that betting them every day that season would make you money. Now, if to go back to that season, they started off slow, but by the time Adley Rutschman got there, they really ramped it up and picked it up. And they ended up hitting that over win total by a good chunk. So it was a successful bet. Now, going into that season, I was also preaching some awards and league leaders and things that didn't come to fruition, the division and things along those lines. And those didn't come to fruition. But I wasn't guaranteeing that year. If you go back to my videos, which are online and I can post for proof, I was saying how that might not have been the year that they really break through, right? That it wasn't one of these things that they were guaranteed to get, okay? So the over win total, though, I was screaming was the easiest bet in sports at the time. And it was. So if then we go back to last year, I was screaming again about their over win total. This time it was placed right at 80 and a half, I believe. So they had just had to get to 500 or better. And I was screaming how they were absolutely an over 500 team and that they were going to be one of the best teams in baseball, I believed. And people called me crazy for that statement at the time, but people did like the over win total when I told them about it. And for the now we all know they won 101 games last year. So they were one of the best teams in baseball. I was correct on that. I was also correct on the over win total. I was also correct on the division that not only I won money on, but I was telling people about. Now, they didn't get the AL, they didn't get the World Series. And last year, I really didn't touch a ton of these guys for awards or league leaders because I didn't necessarily see that team doing those kind of things. I saw being kind of what it was, which is more of this total team effort, different guys for different nights, right? Not led by necessarily a top pack of guys doing most of the damage. And I still think that that's kind of where the Orioles are at now. But I do believe that this core, some of these main guys, are ready to take that next step. Not to mention there are a couple additions from guys who have done it in the past that I believe can continue doing it now for the Orioles. And overall, it's all about the value, right? So these are things that I see value in because I see the reality of happening, okay? Before we get into the exact things this year, I do want to tell you a story real quick of this guy. I shared in a past episode. I'm a bartender, my everyday job at the moment, and I enjoy it. I love it. I talk sports, I talk gambling, and yeah, I serve some drinks, and I enjoy it. I enjoy the process. But I had this guy come up to my bar a few months back, and as he's ordering his drink, he's asking if I remember him, and I told him that I didn't, even though, I'm pretty good at that, but not the best. So there was a chance, we had talked, we had met before, but I just didn't remember him. And I was honest and told him that. And he was like, I don't blame you. I haven't been in here in about 2 years. He's like, but I want to let you know something. I'm an avid sports bettor. He's like, I do it all the time. He's like, and last time I was in here, it was during spring training 2 years ago. And you were in here ranting and raving, not to me, but to some guys that I was near, about the Baltimore Orioles and how they were not only just on the up and up, but most likely the most profitable team that you could bet day in, day out. And that they were going to be very good as far as value-wise for things like the division, the AL, the World Series in the next few years. And he's like, I couldn't help but think about that during that season. So I started betting the Orioles every day. He's like, I don't know this guy. I don't know how smart he is, but I heard your passion. I heard your knowledge, and I trusted. And you got me to believe, and I trusted you. And you've made me so much money the past 2 years. I can't even tell you how much you've made me. But he's like, I've been absolutely cleaning up on your Baltimore Orioles. And I'm all smiles. I'm loving it. Not only do I always love talking about Baltimore Orioles, which is the reason why I'm in front of you folks almost every day talking Orioles, but, I'm happy to make other people money. I want to see other people succeed. And frankly, I didn't feel left out because I also made money. I've made a lot of money the past couple years on the Baltimore Orioles. Between betting them every day and things like the division, like last year, and the win totals and all of this. And so I loved hearing it. And that's one of the reasons I'm saying that this is going to become a fan favorite episode, because there are many of these years where I'm going to be able to make you guys a lot of money. Again, I'm not the smartest guy. I'm not the best sports gambler out there, but I know my Baltimore Orioles. And just like back in that 2014-15 time, and I was screaming this same thing that they were going to become one of the most profitable teams, and they did. I've been screaming it for 2 years now. And the last 2 years have worked out great. And frankly, with the age being so young of this core, and now the money and just how deep and talented everything is, this is a train that's not stopping anytime soon. Because the Orioles of that 14 to 17 range, they were already older. They were already towards the end of some contracts. The ownership wasn't going to put money into it as much as we wanted them to keep everything together. It was, only had a few year window. And that was a great year, few years. They made me a lot of money, but once it was over, it was over. And I'm very honest when it comes to that. I'll never forget the year it ended. I want to say that would have been 18, but maybe it was 17. One of those 2 years, the Orioles actually started off hot. And coming into that season, I wasn't the most optimistic. I was like, oh, it feels like it's kind of falling apart at the seams a little. There's a lot that I'm not excited about going into that year. And but I said they've made me so much money that I am going to continue to bet them because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm jumping off the ship too early. And when I say that, obviously my fandom didn't jump off the ship. There is no jumping off the ship with the Orioles for me as far as being a fan. But as far as being a gambler, I'm not just going to bet them because I love them. I'm going to bet them because I know them better than anything else out there. And I know when it's the time to bet it. And so even though I wasn't that confident that that was still the case, right? Even though I was relatively confident it was about to drop off a cliff, I said, screw it. I'll start the season betting them every day. And I did. And then I even took it a step farther where I took some days off. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think I didn't bet them about 9 days out of the first month and a half. So let's say up until mid-May, okay? I didn't bet them maybe 9 days of the season. 7 of those 9 or something along those lines were losses that I stayed off of. So not only did they have a great record going into that mid-May part, and also gambling even a better record, more profitable, because again, they were undervalued despite the fact that they were so good that they were still underdogs and undervalued even as a favorite. And so you make more money when that's the case on these teams. Okay, so I go to the Preakness almost every year with my buddies, right? And we try and hit an Orioles game the night before, that Friday night. And that year, that's exactly what we did. They were in town. We watched the Orioles. And I'll never forget sitting there watching that team going, this team stinks. Like, this is not the team I've watched the past couple years. This team is no good. And when I went back to the hotel, I crunched some numbers and basically found out that they were letting on an insane amount of base runners, but they weren't giving up runs. Like giving up less than average runs, but giving up way more than average base runners. And I realized something had to give. Either they had to get better with giving up base runners, or they were going to start giving up an insane amount of runs that the offense could not keep up with. And so after that Preakness day, it was a win. I even won money on that Friday before Preakness. And I said, I'm done betting them every day. I'm done betting them, period. And when I tell you, you can go back to that year and look, they dropped off a cliff literally after that day. So I'm very honest when it comes to when to bet the Orioles and when to stop betting the Orioles. But this is still the time to bet the Orioles. And frankly, this window might last a very long time. I hope. However, the way I think this team is going to perform this season and for seasons to come, they're not going to be undervalued. Probably after this year. This is probably the last year where you can get the Orioles undervalued, okay? And one last thing for you non-gamblers out there, because maybe I've already lost you if you're not a gambler, but hopefully you're interested in the idea of making money so you stuck around, right? So stick with me real quick while I explain to really not gamblers some of these numbers that I'm going to throw out, right? Because when you, let's say, bet a friend in your living room, typically it's even money. I'm going to bet you $20. So each of you is putting up $20 and whoever wins gets the other 20. That's rarely how sports betting works, right? You can have lines that are even, which is what that is called, but odds are you're either laying or taking, right? You're either minus or plus. And what I mean by that is, let's look at everything off of $100, right? You're either risking $100 or making $100. If you are minus, you are making $100 on that bet. And so I might say something like a line is minus 115, okay? That means that you have to risk $115 to win $100. Now, most of these bets, because they are more long shots, are plus money, which means when you risk $100, you can win that amount. So if I say something like plus 2,500, that means that you are risking $100 to win $2,500. Now, you don't have to risk that much. You could risk $1 to win $25 or whatever the math may equal out, right? So that's all on you. I'm not sitting here, disclaimer, pretending to be a professional handicapper, guaranteeing anything, even saying that this is gambling advice, right? I'm just telling you, when I look at the lines for this season, when I tell you some of the bets that I see out there, I am loving these. And again, I will be on a lot of these. And there are a lot of bets out there, right? So in total, we're probably going to touch on 40 plus bets, right? I'm not sitting here advocating for you to bet all 40 of them by any means. You can, but in that sense, you would probably need to hit on some of the longer odd ones to make money, because there are much safer bets, the ones that are either minus or the shorter pluses, something like plus 250, not 2,500, that are more likely to happen, right? And some of these, I will go out on a limb and literally guarantee them happening. Now, I'm not going to pay your gambling debt if you lose. I'm not going to claim any of it, because we're all adults here and you need to be responsible. And if you can't afford to lose something, you shouldn't bet something. And you shouldn't just bet this because I say it's a guarantee. But understand, I will be betting it if I believe that it's a lock and a guarantee. Okay? So with that, let's get into episode 11, the gambling episode, one of my favorites. And we're going to run through this as best as possible. We're going to try and be as least confusing with all of these numbers and stuff, but just stick with me and I will make the case for a lot of this stuff, okay? And you'll find out what these plays are that I believe are lock city, as I would say, okay? So the one that, to me, is probably the greatest, easiest bet is the same one that I've preached was the easiest bet the last two off seasons. And free money, like I said, the last two off seasons. And they each were. That's the over win total for the Orioles. Now, you can find different lines at different books. Okay, some have them a little in the lower 90s. Some have them even closer to the mid 80s sometimes. But overall, I'm going to take the 89.5 that I'm seeing on FanDuel. So they have to win 90 or more games for you to hit that over. Okay, it's minus 115. So again, you're risking $115 to win $100. It's not the juiciest play. It's not going to make you $1 million unless you're willing to put up over $1 million, right? So those typically aren't the ones that I love to pick, but I think it's guaranteed personally. In a past episode, we broke down the schedule, and just looking at the schedule and understanding how deep and talented this Orioles roster is, and how these players and prospects continue to grow and take steps forward, and understanding the mass amount of guys that are still yet to come, guys like Stowers, guys like Heston, Guys like I'm forgetting the infielder, but there's a lot of Connor Norby. Yeah, these type of guys, not to mention then the pitchers that we could get into, are all guys that truly are going to wind up being on this team and they're so deep and so talented that the Orioles are going to continue to be that top team. Not only that, but they are in the market for making upgrades and trades. So if they're starting to slack and it looks like they might not get to that point, I truly believe they will buy and make sure they get over that hump, right? And it's the type of move that if they had that player in the beginning of the season, the win total might even be higher. I think you're getting great value on the idea that the Orioles win 90 plus games because I don't see any way that they don't win at least 90 games. With the schedule they have in front of them, like I said, I broke it down. They don't have to be historically great in the beginning or end. But as long as they are doing pretty well on either side, they essentially have to be about a 500 team in a 99 game stretch for them to win 91 games. Okay? So over 89.5 to me is easy. I see them doing much better than that. In fact, that leads me to the overall wins, right? Or not overall wins, but you can bet 90 plus wins, which is the same. But if let's say you're getting one of those other lines, let's say your book is giving you over under 92.5, 91.5 on the Orioles win total, that's another way that you can find a way to get the Orioles at that 90 plus, which I truly believe is the floor for this baseball team this season. Okay? Now, right now, the line at FanDuel is the exact same for the over win total as it is for 90 plus, basically because they're the exact same bet. Literally, because they're the exact same bet, just phrased differently. But you also can bet 100 plus wins. And that's at plus 470. So $100 would win you $470. And I love the idea of them getting 100 plus wins. Sure, last season was the first time in my entire life, in now 35 years, but 34 seasons worth of years, that I saw the Orioles win 100 or more games. And they just got there despite a great season. So it might be a little cocky to be like, oh, I absolutely love the 100 plus wins, but I do. Again, I talked about that schedule. I don't believe in that 99 game stretch in the middle of the season that they're a 50 and 49 team. I believe that they're much better than that, which would then add from that 91 wins. And if they dominate some really mediocre opponents in the front end and back end of the schedule, that's how you wind up getting not only to 100, but even higher than that, 105. So I love that 100 win total. And that's going to take me right into the next bet that I'm a huge fan of. This is at plus 2,000. So this is when you start making real money. This is what I talk about in the value, the undervalued Orioles, giving you so much betting value, okay? Because betting them for best record in baseball, again on FanDuel at plus 2,000, is unbelievable because there is a real path to them getting to that 105-ish wins, okay? And I'll say this also, and this isn't going to be applicable on every bet, and this is up to the bookmakers, whether it be FanDuel, DraftKings, whatever you may use. But for those inexperienced bettors, they typically offer you cash outs on bets that are looking relatively successful, okay? So before I get into the other bets, that's a point I want to make also. So you could technically not even win that bet and come out a big winner from it. Because if come All-Star break, the Orioles are the best team in baseball by a few games, guess what? They might offer you $500 on your 100. So there is a chance, and then the farther the season gets, the better it continues to look. It's definitely possible for you to get a very nice cash out on things like this if they're looking promising. And that's another way to kind of make sure you make some money back. Because there are seasons where I have bets that I cash out because it takes care of basically the bankroll, or at least most or part of the bankroll that I invested in the whole season. And I still can have other tickets still riding to attempt to make money off of them, even if I take maybe one of my best tickets, most promising tickets, and essentially sell it off early for getting back some of that investment. Again, all personal choices. I'm just letting you know that things don't always have to win for you to win if you're smart about when to cash out, when to take the offer, and kind of get a good sense of those type of things. And frankly, I'm going to be, again, on a lot of these. So I'm going to have my eye on that type of stuff. And if I get to a point where I believe the cash out is worth it, I'm going to share that information with you folks. So you're not completely in it alone. You're not going at it completely blind. Again, I'm not advising you even take it, let alone listen to me if it comes to the point where I'm saying cash out. All I'm saying is, if you're unfamiliar with the process, you just need the bet to be promising to have a chance at making back some of your money. Okay? And so the Orioles' best record in baseball bet, I absolutely love. Again, plus 2,000. I have it on FanDuel. So now we're going to get to one just like the over win total. Personally, I don't see any way this loses. Now, it might be the longest line that I give you, the most expensive line I give you. It's minus 230, meaning in order to win $100, you have to risk $230. But that's for them to make the playoffs. This team is absolutely going to make this playoffs. The AL in general is relatively weak outside of AL East teams and AL West teams. And really, the AL West is just 3 teams. And if one of them doesn't have a promising season, which is certainly possible, one of them has a disappointing season, might only be 2. And frankly, I could see maybe even 2 of them having slightly disappointing seasons and barely hitting 90 wins, barely hitting mid to high 80s, okay? Like a team like the Astros takes a step back, finishes with like 83 wins. A team like the Rangers takes a step back, also finishes around 83 wins. Above 500, but maybe competing for the last wild card spot. The point is, if the Orioles don't run with the division, there is absolutely no chance they're not at least towards, if not at the top of that wild card. The Orioles will make the playoffs this year. I'm going to bank a lot on it, probably. I'm going to bank a heavy risk on it because at only minus 230, I believe that's underpriced for something that's guaranteed to give you money back. Okay? Now, on the flip side of them just competing for a playoff spot, if you take them to be the number 1 seed in the AL, which again, I like them as best record in baseball. And frankly, the 2 teams that I think they're competing with are both in the NL, in the Dodgers and the Braves. And frankly, if I pinpoint a 3rd or even 4th team they're competing with, both of those teams are probably in the NL. So the idea of them number 1 seed in the AL, I absolutely love. It's at plus 550, so 100 wins you 550. And I think it's a great roll of the dice. Again, I think that they're going to be at the top of the division. I think that they're absolutely in a playoff spot. And I think that they have a great chance at repeating as the number 1 seed in the AL. And if I really want to break down the kind of odds, I think Vegas is showing you by pricing it at plus 550 that they have a very good chance at that, right? Because, okay, so if I'm betting for best record in baseball, it means you have to lead the league, not only AL, but also NL in wins at plus 2,000. So if I were to say, okay, well, I want them to think they're going to be one of the 2 teams, or they're going to be the team leading the AL, I would think that would be about half of that 2,000, give or take about 1,000. Instead, it's down to 550, which value-wise isn't necessarily great. I wish it was even a little high. I wish it was higher, closer to that 1,000, closer to 750 at least. But the idea that Vegas has pushed it down means to me that Vegas truly thinks the Orioles are going to be that 1 seed again and repeat. Now, this next one shouldn't come as a shock because I feel like I've already said it a couple times because I couldn't even hold it. But the Orioles to win the AL East again is plus 200, 2-1 on your money. And the idea they're not even the favorite is insulting, is absolutely insulting. The idea that New York Yankees are plus 155 as the favorite and the Orioles are second at plus 200. Then you got Toronto 380, Tampa 550, which on a side note is kind of good value for Tampa, I believe, even if I hope and believe they might take a step back. And then Boston at 1900 or 1400, whatever that number is. Long shot, underdog. I mean, the Orioles at plus 200, it's not, again, the juiciest. It's not the craziest money back. But 2-1 on your money on a team that I believe is at least a step, if not multiple steps, above all four of those other teams in the division. Not only has it shown it can win the division like it did last year, but they showed at least the last year, if not last couple years, that they play these other teams very tough, right? The guys that we have in our clubhouse aren't scared in the least bit. If anything, I feel like they are overly confident when they face any of these division opponents. So the head-to-heads, we're going to win out more often than not. And so ultimately, again, I wouldn't guarantee any of those other four teams break 90 wins. But I'm pretty much guaranteeing the Orioles are going to break 90 wins. So the division just goes hand in hand. So these are things too where it becomes cluster wins, right? Because if you bet either 90 plus or the 90 or over 89 and a half wins, and they hit that, well, then they're at least close, if not going for the division. So let's say they're at the top of the division. They hit that. Then you're going for best record. Then you're going for 100 plus. Awesome. Then you're going for best record in the AL. Awesome. Then you're going for best record in baseball. So just out of those, you could, if you bet $100 on each, you could be up over $3,000. Probably closer to $4,000. Obviously, all of those need to go right. Obviously, all of those need to hit. But when you start checking it off, you go, oh, in the playoffs, 90 wins, 100 wins, best record in the AL, best record in baseball. Because in order to get the top one, you pretty much need to get all of the bottom ones. Or you do have to get all of the bottom ones. So because of that, it just starts ticking up and your number keeps rising and you start getting better and better odds too, each one you hit. And that's where you're really in now the profit, right? That's why I wanted to start out with those because they're regular season stuff. And that's how you can basically go into not only the postseason, but the holidays and just in general up a lot of money, okay? And paying for all of these other bets that we talked about that we're yet to see the winners. Now, some of these we'll already know will be losing tickets because if you're taking multiple guys for MVP, only one guy can win. That means if, let's say, you have three guys for MVP, two of those three have to lose, and the third one might lose too. So because of that, you're not going to win all of these bets. There's zero chance that you can win every single one of these bets if you have multiple tickets on the same, let's say, award. Okay? But, again, if you wind up hitting one of those guys on the award, you paid for everything. And if you can hit in the regular season on that grouping of bets, that means you've paid for the whole investment plus a profit on everything that you have still riding. And some things could absolutely continue to happen. So now we get to the postseason, okay? These are three bets. Not only do I absolutely love, but two of them, again, I'm not guaranteeing, but I am so overly confident in these two bets, okay? The first one is just to reach the ALCS, okay? Just reach the championship game in the AL at plus 280. Is it a lock? No. We saw what happened last year as the 1 seed, and then they didn't get out of the divisional round. But if nothing more, if I'm assuming that they're in the playoffs, that means they either are going to continue playing in the wild card, okay, which keeps them hot, possibly going to that ALDS to play a team who's not used to that off stretch. And even if they are used to it, that still doesn't make it necessarily easier. Okay, or we win the division, we skip the wild card round, and now we just have to win one round to win that plus 280 bet. So I absolutely love that. Because odds are the Orioles are probably going to be close to an even money, if not favorite, against whoever they play in the playoffs. Even if they have to go through the wild card round, and then in the divisional round they're facing, let's say, the 1 seed. I still believe, absolutely, that the Orioles not only can, but will make the ALCS. That's one that I'm fully confident in. And again, you're not making the craziest money on that. 100 wins you 280. But I absolutely love them to at least take that next step out of the divisional round into the ALCS. But then comes the next one, the AL pennant at plus 650 to win the American League. I am very overly confident, potentially, in them getting to the World Series this year. I think everything's building. We saw what happened at the camp in Sarasota, how great they were, the chemistry, everything about this team screams taking not just one jump, but 2 jumps into the World Series this year. So, again, if you bet both of those, 100 on each, and they get to the World Series, you've already made over $900 on those 2. Again, this stuff adds up quick when you are an undervalued team like the Orioles. And then, if you have them for the World Series, this line especially can be a little jumpy. I know I've seen it down towards 1,200. I've seen it up towards 1,600. But we're just going to take the median that I found, which is like 1,400 plus 1,400. 100 wins you 1,400 on the World Series. I'm so overly confident that they get to the World Series this year, depending on who they face and depending on certain factors. We'll see how confident I am in them in the World Series. Again, I'm very honest. As optimistic as I am, I feel like I'm very honest. And so we'll see. I'm not sitting here saying that's guaranteed to hit. But if you want to talk cash outs, and you took all 3 of those, you hit the ALCS, reaching the ALCS. You hit winning the ALCS. Now you're at 900, and then you have plus 1,400 where you probably could cash out, even if they're a big underdog, for another 400 or 500. So you don't even need to ride that through the World Series. And heck, if you wait for a game and the Orioles take game 1, that could jump up to about 1,000. So it's just one of these things where if you ride it out, sure, you can make the whole amount. But as long as they get there, there are certainly times where you could cash that out for more of a nice profit. Now, to me, if I've already hit, let's say, all of these regular season ones, and I've already hit 2 of the 3 postseason ones, I'm not cashing out that World Series. I'm already so in the green that I'm not getting greedy for 4, or I'll be greedy and try and win the 1,400 instead of taking another 400 or 500. That's me. Because, again, I'd already been up. I might as well try and get the best profit I can. But obviously, they need to hit those in order for me to be in that situation. Either way, no matter what kind of regular season the Orioles have, I'm almost guaranteeing that they hit 90 wins, they're in the playoffs, and they could absolutely get to the ALCS, if not win the ALCS. And then anyone has a chance at the World Series, baby. So those are, as far as gambling goes, the team bets that I am going to be on. Okay? I love all of them. In fact, those are some of my most locked bets. It's the easiest way to bet these future bets, because when it comes to awards and when it comes to league leaders, it's very tough. Not to say I don't hit them here and there, but there are years that go by where you don't hit them. And then certainly, I'm infamously been on things like Shohei Ohtani, in another sport, Aaron Rodgers, both those guys' MVP runs I had at great numbers, especially the first one for Ohtani and whatever number that was for Rodgers. but the most recent one for Rodgers. But again, don't want to get into another sport, let alone even another guy in the league. And frankly, if I'm bringing up Ohtani, there's probably other things I think we all know I could be talking about as far as Ohtani. But that's not why I'm here. Certainly not what we're talking about this episode. And frankly, we're the Baltimore Orioles podcast. If he was an Oriole, I'd be talking a lot about it. He's a Dodger. It is what it is. If there's something that really needs to be said, I'll say it. Otherwise, we're here for the Orioles, baby. That's all I want to talk about. All right, so let's move to some of the awards of the year, okay? Awards for this year. Again, I'm going to give out multiple guys for some of these awards. And only one guy ultimately can win. Might not be from our team, so all of them might be losing bets that I'm giving you. But I think there are some interesting and cool numbers that I really like, okay? So we're going to start with the big one, MVP, okay? And the names that I'm going to be saying are going to be some of our studs, obviously. And you can't bet on every player in baseball to win these awards, okay? They only list a certain amount of players. So there might be guys in some of these awards. In fact, one in particular, not an MVP, but one in particular that isn't listed that I'm keeping my eye on if he ever hits the board and he's been playing well. I mean, if he hits the board, it means he's been playing well. And somebody that I'm going to jump on as soon as I possibly can if that moment comes. But that's to come in a minute or two. As far as MVP goes, Gunnar Henderson at plus 1,800, I absolutely love. It's not the juiciest thing. I kind of wish it was a little more. But Gunnar is an absolute superstar. He's now set at short. He doesn't have to worry about shifting over his versatility. He's going to play almost entirely at shortstop and DH. But he could absolutely have an MVP run. In fact, at some point in his career, I believe for multiple years, he'll have MVP runs. So it's the same argument I kind of made with Ohtani, where I said Ohtani's this guy who will at some point win an MVP. So along those same lines, I'm going to continue taking Gunnar every single year to win an MVP, at least until it's not juicy. So we'll see in the future. But for this year, plus 1,800 for Gunnar Henderson, I was a little scared off early by that oblique injury he came into camp with. But how could you not be overly excited? And how could you not be worried now? Because the spring he had, as soon as he hit the dirt, he was running. Like, he was hitting balls hard. He was hitting extra base hits. He was hitting home runs. He was doing everything that we want to see Gunnar Henderson do. He came back so strong that I'm not worried at all about Gunnar Henderson now and that oblique injury, thus putting me back in love with him for MVP, plus 1,800. The other man that I will probably take every year until he wins one is Adley Rutschman. I absolutely believe Adley Rutschman is going to be not only in an MVP race at some point, but most likely win an MVP at some point in his career. So I'm going to take it every single year, right? Because in my mind, right, if I believe that Gunnar and Adley most likely each win an MVP at some point, and again, I'm being very optimistic, but if I put $100 on each one, that means as long as they hit one in their career, I should be plus money on all those bets. Hopefully they win it this year, and I don't need to bet it year after year after year. But we'll see. Adley at plus 2,500, 100 wins you 2,500. I'm absolutely in love with, right? So then there's some other names that I've seen on the list, and there's a group after Adley, as far as Orioles go, that I will not be betting on. But I still see a little intrigue, and it's guys like Cedric Mullins at plus 15,000. So again, now we're talking 100 wins you 15,000. Cedric Mullins, Austin Hayes, and Ryan Mountcastle. Sorry, had to read my writing real quick. And Ryan Mountcastle. So Hayes and Mountcastle are 18,000. Cedric at 15,000. Now, 2 years ago, I was saying Cedric Mullins for MVP was a cool bet. Now, I'm not convinced that he can stay healthy enough or be overly successful enough to be in an MVP race. I don't see him stealing enough bases to make it this thing that is crazy, right? When you have guys like Acuna going like 40 and 70 or 50 and 70, right? 2 years ago, I was talking about, Cedric doing like a 30 for 30 and being up there. But now you have guys like Witt, you have guys like Acuna, you have all these guys that are going to put up those kind of seasons. It's becoming less and less crazy, and I don't think he's going to be enough of that top tier hitter to make that run. Another one with health issues, I'm concerned, both really, Hayes and Mountcastle. They all three suffered minor injuries, nursed minor injuries in camp. So I'm slightly worried about any of them staying healthy. And Hayes, I don't see even more than Mullins. I don't even need to get into that. I just don't think his numbers, despite the fact that he was an all-star last year, his numbers were not at the top of everything, and I don't see him taking that jump. Mountcastle, I could make the argument, has the potential to, let's say, be up there in the league with home runs, towards the top of home runs in the league. Now, playing time might not be there. Obviously, if he's having that success, he'll get more playing time. So I could make that argument. In fact, at one point last year, I think after his game where he hit 3 home runs, I actually took him to lead the league in home runs at, I think, plus 20,000. And then he got vertigo. So I'm a little hesitant to bet Ryan Mountcastle for anything right now. I'll just be honest. I don't see the MVP conversation for any of those three. Okay, so personally, I'm going to stay off those three. But hell, if you make the bet and they end up winning it, God bless you. Okay, now at longer odds, I will make the argument at least for one guy to put it on. But there's the chance 2 guys. Okay, so the one that I won't tell you to bet on as much is Jackson Holliday at plus 20,000. Now, we know he's starting in the minors. There's no word on how long he'll be there. Maybe he's there the minimum 16 days. Maybe he's there 2.5, 3 months. Maybe he's there till September. So at plus 20,000, a minor leaguer that I'm not sure when he will come up is not really what I'm looking to bet on. But if we go back a couple weeks ago to when I thought he was guaranteed on the team, I actually was loving that because last year, Corbin Carroll, through the first half of the season, was right at the top of his MVP conversation. And I thought that was the potential that Jackson Holliday had. Not starting the year in the majors, you'd have to get up there very quick and perform very well. And even if you miss 3 weeks, let's say, it's not the end of the world, but you have to be available and not injured and very hot the entire rest of the way, essentially, for your numbers to ultimately get there. I don't see that being the case anymore. So I probably, even though I thought I was going to, I probably won't have money on Jackson Holliday for MVP at plus 20,000. However, the Oriole at plus 20,000 I will have money on is Anthony Santander, Tony Taters. And it's kind of crazy, and I'm not sitting here screaming that it's going to happen, but I could see the reality where Tony Taters has that true breakout year. The last couple years, he's really found his consistency, maybe not in stretches, but as far as a whole season goes, he's found that consistency. He showed he can kind of take it to the next level. And we've talked about his overall consistency as far as getting hot, very cold, very hot, very cold. Well, if he cleans that up, Anthony Santander could absolutely put up MVP caliber numbers. Okay, these power hitters don't necessarily have to have the best batting average, have the best on-base percentage. If their home runs and their slugging is out of control and his RBIs are out of control, he could be up there. And frankly, if he is that hot as far as home runs, his RBIs should follow because the guys in front of him are most likely getting on base. Guys like Gunnar, guys like Adley. These are the guys that are going to consistently get on base. And Tony's batting right in that middle, right? You'd imagine anywhere between 3 and 6, and even that might be a stretch. 3 and 5, really. I would think Tony Taters is batting. So the opportunity is there for Tony Taters at plus 20,000, right? Again, we want to talk cash outs. Imagine a scenario where you put $100 to win 20,000 on Tony Taters, okay? Hell, you could put $10 to win 2,000 on Tony Taters. And he goes on an absolute tear the first half. And in the All-Star break, he's in, let's say, top 3 or 5 of MVP talk. Realistically, they could offer you 10% of that. So for that $10, let's say, they might offer you $500 now to get out of that deal. Even $200-300. So that's just the value that I'm talking about and the options with cashing out potentially in the future on things that even if Santander's having the best start and showing how consistent he's become, do I still believe that that might continue the entire stretch of the season and that other guys won't catch up to him and surpass him? Probably not. So if I get a really interesting number, a real juicy number profit on that bet, I might take it. Because especially, let's say Gunner's also having a tremendous start to the year, right? And Santander's like first in MVP voting and Gunner's like third or fourth. Okay, well, then I could sell the Santander ticket, buy myself out of that, make a big profit to pay for some of these other bets, and then keep the Gunner ticket. And Gunner might actually have that second half where he makes the MVP push. Okay, so again, only one of them could potentially win. And I'm going to skip those 3 in the middle I talked about. But as far as Gunner, Adley, and Santander especially, I see great value on it. Gunner and Adley because I truly believe that they are an MVP. And they are the type of guy to win at least an MVP at some point in their career. Each of them. And Santander just because the number is so crazy good. And he's going to absolutely have the opportunities between first, between DH. They're going to keep Tony Taters in that lineup, assuming he's healthy and he's playing well. And we've seen in the past, even when he gets cold, he's still one of those guys that tends to get regular playing time more often than maybe, let's say, a Mountcastle if he's cold. Okay? One of those things. Hell, even Cedric we saw when he was struggling to hit lefties. He became more of a platoon. So it's just one of these things where Tony Tater's playing time to me is more guaranteed in a large scale than Cedric, than Hayes, than Mountie. That's why I would have priced him better than, or at lower odds than those 3. But again, the Orioles are undervalued. And when you get that, you find markets that are undervalued. So Cedric Mullins is a bigger name than Anthony Santander. Hayes was in the All-Star game last year. He's a bigger name. Ryan Mountcastle had that 3 home run day, and I think might be more publicized at times than Tony Taters. Don't think that Tony Taters can't get off to such a crazy start that he puts himself up there and hits bombs. And we'll talk about that because he'll be very home run reliant. And we'll have some bets that we talk about regarding that, okay? So now to the next award, Cy Young. And I love the idea of Corbin Burnes. He's plus 800. He's the favorite in the American League. And not the most juiciest, but again, a guy I think will just almost guarantee to be up there in the top 2, top 3 throughout the year. You lost the AL favorite Garrett Cole for at least a month, if not 2 or 3, or the whole season. So he's kind of off the board, Garrett Cole. You'd think by the time he comes back, there's just not enough he can do to get himself up there in the conversation, as long as some of these other guys are being successful. Corbin Burnes is one of those that I believe will be so consistent for one of the best teams in baseball that he'll wind up just getting a lot of wins that people love to see. He's going to have a nice ERA, I believe, somewhere probably in the 3.2s, I would guess. Possibly even better, closer to the 2.8s, 2.6s. We'll see how good he can be. He won the Cy Young 2 years ago, so I'm not putting it past him to win another Cy Young for the Orioles this year. And I think he's more than ready. Despite maybe his slow start in spring, he showed me enough to not be worried about that. And a veteran elite pitcher like Corbin Burnes, I'm not worried about that. So Burnes is absolutely somebody who I'm interested in, but also at plus 800, it might not be juicy enough for me to go crazy on. But still, 100 wins you 800 if Corbin Burnes wins that Cy Young. And I think he'll be up there to the point that at some point in this season, you should be able to cash out for at least a quarter of that, if not half of that. So again, taking free money, even if the bet itself doesn't win, I believe. Grayson Rodriguez, a lot more meat on that bone at plus 2,300. And I really love Grayson to take this next step up. In fact, before Burnes was brought in, okay, I was going around screaming about Grayson Rodriguez for Cy Young. In fact, I've been screaming that since he came back to the majors last season and had that great stretch and showed us just how good he can be. But I touched on this a few episodes ago where I had a revelation the other day where, you know, he's still young. I think he still has stuff to work out. And he didn't have the best spring numbers, despite the fact that the Orioles may have manufactured that by not wanting him to throw 100% and not wanting him to hit 102, 103 on the gun all the time. I'm a little worried about that. I think that will come back with real games and giving full effort. But my revelation the other day was that no matter how great of a season he has, I think there's going to be about a month and a half stretch where it gets a little bit rocky, where it gets off the rails a little, where he starts losing some mechanic. I think it's going to be a lessened version of last year for him in the sense of, you know, he came up and he pretty much got destroyed early, got sent down to the minors, worked out that stuff, and when he came up, was great again. And I've talked about this before where him getting rocked last year, I thought was overstated. As a guy that watched all of those games, I remember it being more just like one really bad inning. You know, he might have had a few where he had to work out of jams and got out of it before the bad inning happened. But there were other starts where he like dominated for 2, 3, 4 innings and then boom, gave up 6 or 7. So it's just one of these things where I think he might hit similar roughness at some point this year. Probably towards the middle part because he's not used to pitching in the majors from start to finish. So it might get off the rails slightly, but I do want to emphasize slightly because I don't think he's going to have to go back to the minors to adjust. I think he'll just regress maybe to a slightly above average to average major league starter during that month and a half. And I think ultimately it's going to take a hit on his Cy Young potential this season. But best believe, just like Gunnar, just like Adley, Grayson Rodriguez is a name that I'm going to be betting for Cy Young every single year because I believe he absolutely will win a Cy Young for these Orioles at some point in the near future. Okay, so those are really the two big ones. There were two other names I'll throw out there, and that's Kyle Bradish at plus 12,000 and John Means at plus 20,000. Now, we know both of them are out. However, we've heard that Mike Elias and these Orioles have come out and said that they expect both of them back not only in the first half, but early into the first half. That would lead me to believe that they're not going to have to miss 2 or 3 months like we talked Garrett Cole might, taking him out of the conversation. Maybe they only miss a month. And frankly, if you miss just a month in the season, if you dominate the rest of the way, you could compile good enough numbers to get up there. Now, John Means, just like Cedric Mullins, was a guy that I talked for this award 2 years ago. And that was the year he got injured after, I think, one start on the second day of the season or first day of the season. But so obviously that didn't come to fruition. But if John Means can get back to the way he was pitching the year before injury, he's certainly a potential Cy Young candidate. And Kyle Bradish, if he can get back to the way he pitched last year, is certainly a Cy Young candidate. So this is something that I've kind of thrown out there throughout the entire offseason and the entire spring training is the undervaluedness in the guys the Orioles have to be up there in this Cy Young conversation just because of the undervalued talent that they have on this rotation. Along those same lines, should come as no surprise, the guy I'm the president of his fan club, Tyler Wells, is a guy that I want to bet for Cy Young. I wish there was a line out there. I can't find one. If you can, let me know where, because I would love to bet Tyler Wells for Cy Young. Fortunately, I don't see it out there. However, he's going to have the opportunity to start to begin the season. If he starts pitching the way he did last year to start the season, and he's up there in WHIP, and he's up there in ERA, and he's one of the best pitchers in the American League to begin the year, it's not going to be long till his name drops on the charts. The problem is he won't go on the charts and he won't go on the board unless he's very successful early. And if he's very successful early, then when they put him on the board, he might not be at that 20,000 that John Means is at. He might be closer to the 2,300 Gray Rod's at. Hell, he could be even closer to Burns, close around like 1,000, because that's the type of potential he has. Remember, last year for the first 2 months of the season, he was in that Cy Young talk. He was a top candidate, maybe the top candidate in the American League for the first 2 months of last season for Cy Young before it got off the rails. To me, Tyler Wells is the name that if there's a long shot to take, I'm hoping that if he hits the board, he is priced at that 20,000-ish that John Means is at. Because then there's so much meat on the bone, and it's so realistic in my mind. But either way, whenever Tyler Wells hits that board, assuming he pitches well enough to get himself on it, I will be taking it. So best believe it's probably something that I'm going to watch every single day after Tyler Wells starts, and I'm going to wait for, and I'm going to talk about on this show as soon as it gets posted, if it gets posted. So now we talk Rookie of the Year, and you want to talk value. Jackson Holliday, since being dropped to the minors, has gone from pretty much even money favorite to plus 470, third on the board. I mean, 470 isn't an enormous number, but just the idea that he might only miss 2.5, 3.5 weeks, maybe a month of the season. Listen, the AL does have some relatively big names out there, specifically two guys in Texas, in Carter and Wyatt Langford. But listen, baseball's very hard, man. Just because you're this top prospect and you're expected to be great doesn't mean you are going to be. So it wouldn't shock me if Jackson Holliday gets himself up about a month into the season and performs so well that he can get back to the top of that Rookie of the Year talk. So at plus 470, I think there's some value for Holliday. The real value to me on this list is plus 2,500 Colton Cowser for Rookie of the Year. Now, Cowser's a guy that just last episode, despite the fact that he made the team with a great spring, we did talk some reasons to possibly be pessimistic or at the very least cautious about Colton Cowser this season. However, he's faced that adversity last year of not succeeding in the majors. And the way he performed this spring shows just the potential he has. So if he can do kind of what he did this spring, maybe not as many home runs, maybe more doubles or triples than home runs, but still hitting that way, he's absolutely going to get himself towards the top of this Rookie of the Year conversation. And if either the health or the performance of guys like Mullins, Hayes, and even Santander aren't there, he's going to get himself more playing time, especially if he's performing. And so Colton Cowser at plus 2,500 is absolutely a name that I'm keying in on this bet. Because again, that's one of those that I could absolutely see getting a great cash out at some point this season, halfway through the year, when he's gotten more playing time because of an injury, and he's performed so well that he gets himself up there. And you can sell off that ticket for a profit. Another guy on there, the last guy I'll talk about for Rookie of the Year, is Heston Kjerstad, plus 5,000. I don't know if Heston's going to get called up quick enough, because I think the Orioles may rather bring up Stowers first than Heston when they need an outfielder. So I pumped the brakes on Heston. However, he has such the raw power and hitting tools that if he does get up to the majors relatively early, he could absolutely make a run. And at plus 5,000, a lot of meat on that bone to get a nice, profitable cash out if he can get up and perform for a nice chunk of time. I also question if he would absolutely be getting enough at bats to consistently be getting the numbers that he needs to put himself in that conversation when he does come up. I'd make the argument that Cowser has the much better opportunity to get, let's say, 500 plate appearances this year than Heston does. Almost guaranteed. I mean, Cowser's starting the season on the roster. Heston's not. And Cowser can play center field. Heston won't. So the versatility of Cowser is better. Now, you could say Heston could get runs at first base and probably more runs at DH. And that's true. I just don't know, one, if Heston's going to have enough time to really make a case for himself for Rookie of the Year overall. Whether it's just staying in the minors too long or when he gets called up, just not having those everyday reps like Cowser could. Okay? Now, this one, there's only one got to talk about for this, and it's obvious. But for Manager of the Year, Brandon Hyde at plus 1,100. I understand the Orioles won 101 games last year, number 1 seed. So they have to exceed those expectations, essentially, for Brandon Hyde to get there. But when you look at the list of the managers, most of the guys above him, as far as favorites go, are from kind of crappy teams. Like you got Detroit's manager and Boston's manager and the Royals manager, I think, and some of these crappier teams that really have to have not just a step up, but 2-3 steps up, right? People look at what Brandon Hyde did last year and these Orioles did last year and think, what's the next team? They don't think that the Orioles are that next team to take another step, right? And this is the thing that I personally love, because if you we talked about those regular season ones out of the way, and you're that win total and best record and 1 seed and all of these things, well, guess what? Manager of the Year could absolutely come at that point. Even if you find a way not to get the MVP, Cy Young, Rookie of the Year from this team, that Manager of the Year, especially if really no other AL team really shows enough to take that spotlight from Brandon Hyde, I think at plus 1,100, it's shocking value, truly. I thought it would definitely be lower. I thought it would be 500-600. And again, and I understand the idea of coming off a 101 and coming off of the 1 seed. You really have to outperform. If they win 105, 107 games, best team in baseball, you're telling me Brandon Hyde's not going to win? Boom, there's another plus 1,100 win for you on this season if that happens. All right, and the last of the awards, and I've sprinkled this throughout some episodes at times, Craig Kimbrell for Reliever of the Year at plus 1,800. We had an episode where I dug into the idea that Kimbrell will possibly lose the job at some point this season. And certainly that's possible. But in that same breath, I advocated for him winning Reliever of the Year. Not in that same universe. If he loses it, he's not getting Reliever of the Year. But I could see the other end of the spectrum. That's all I'm saying. In the idea that Craig Kimbrell could win it. And at plus 1,800 for one of the best teams in baseball, I love it. I also love the idea of sometimes, okay, so you talk what's due, right? Things are due sometimes. Like things get back to average. Well, the idea that the Orioles won that many games in 1-run games last year, to me, doesn't signify they're going to now lose those 1-run games. It signifies more that they're going to take a bigger lead into the end of the game. Now, part of that could lose you Reliever of the Year. If your team's up 4, 5, 6 runs every game, you're not really going to get in there as a closer. And if you do, it's not a save opportunity. So that's not going to win it for you. I don't think, though, it swings that heavily. You will have days where the Orioles are up large, non-save situations for these guys. But ultimately, I just believe the Orioles will have more 2-run and 3-run wins, in which case Craig Kimbrell should be getting a lot of those saves, or at least to have the first shot at it, right? Because if he loses the job, we lose that bet. I just think that it's a great value bet. Are there better relievers out there? Absolutely. But this isn't the most dominating reliever award. This is the reliever of the year. I believe brought to you by Rolaids. But Craig Kimbrell at plus 1,800, I love the idea of. Okay, so that's one that I've had marked on my books for a while now. I knew that I would be betting Kimbrell, even if I absolutely could see the reality of the wheels falling off for him at some point and losing the job. Again, I'm betting value. I'm betting the idea of things that could happen. And that's certainly one that I believe is possible. Okay, so now we get off of awards and go into league leaders. Now, I don't like to go crazy in the league leaders bets because it's so hard. There are so many talented players. You bet a guy to lead the league in home runs, you may hit 59. Another guy might hit 60 and beat you. So there are very few guys that I would take and look at as being a valuable bet, right? A few years ago, I think Aaron Judge, for instance, had a larger number than I expected him to have in the thousands to lead the league in home runs. And that was one of those that I'm like, oh, absolutely. The annoying part is that was the year before Judge had his year. So, again, right thought, wrong time. But let's jump in. I got 4 categories. Well, everybody has one has 2. Okay, so we'll get into it real quick. Off of just what we talked about, Kimbrell leading the league in saves is plus 2,400. Yet another thing where maybe the Orioles offense is so good and the starters are so good that they're winning games by large margins and he's not getting those save opportunities. I think that it's more likely he comes in with a 2 to 3 run lead a lot. And that's so nice because you can still give up a run, maybe even 2, and get that save that day, right? So the idea of Kimbrell leading the league in saves, to me, might even be a better bet than reliever of the year because you just have to lead one category. Reliever of the year, you have to be up there in a lot. Okay, so while I like both of them, at plus 2,400 to lead the league in saves for a team that I believe has a great chance at leading the league in wins, just goes hand in hand, gang. You see my thought process, I believe. So now we're going to move to strikeouts. I really only want to target one main guy, okay, at least to lead the league in strikeouts. And that's Grayson Rodriguez, plus 8,000. I mean, listen, we know he's a strikeout pitcher. He's working more to rely on his fielders, and I think he's done a very good job of that, rolling some more ground balls, getting some more fly balls. But overall, he's going to look to pump that gas, and he's shown that he can strike out a lot of guys. When he is on and that fastball is clicking, he can strike out a lot of guys. Now, there is some concern because he didn't strike out a lot of guys this spring, and the velocity at times was down this spring. But again, I think the Orioles, I know, talked about that in at least one of the starts. That was by design. So it's natural to believe that the Orioles were just letting him work on getting outs without the strikeouts, which in turn will make him easier and more confident to get those strikeouts, weirdly, because he has the strikeout stuff. So at plus 8,000 to lead the league in strikeouts, I think is unbelievable value and something that I'm going to be on. Now, to lead the league in hits, Adley Rutschman at plus 15,000. Plus 15,000. Okay, now, I don't necessarily, again, with these league leaders in stats, it's very hard to be confident. Even if the guy has a great season, somebody else is going to have a good season too. You know what I mean? There are a lot of guys that are going to have great seasons and be up there. But Adley, I think last year was only about 60, give or take, hits off the lead league. So it's just one of these things in my eyes that at plus 15,000 could absolutely happen. Could absolutely see Adley being such a good hitter this year that he is up there in hits. And again, if they're offering cash outs on it, which they might not, but if they do, that's certainly one at plus 15,000 that you can get an intriguing cash out if you get to a point of the season and Adley's up there in hits and racing for the league. Now, with home runs, to lead the league in home runs, I pinpointed two guys. One I really like. One, not maybe as much do I like to lead the league in it, but at plus 10,000, each of them, I think is good enough to throw the dice on, right? And it's Anthony Santander and Gunnar Henderson, each priced at plus 10,000. Okay, so 100 wins you 10,000. And again, the idea that just one of them can get off to a, maybe not start, but at some point mid-season, be right there towards the top of the pack in home runs is absolutely possible. And you may wind up with a great cash out opportunity at one point on one, if not both of them. Personally, I believe more in the idea of Santander being up there in the league of home runs than Gunnar, because naturally Santander's game relies more on the home run, while Gunnar can absolutely crush the ball and will many times this season. He's also going to want to put his legs in motion. He's also going to want to let his wheels do the churning, right? Santander's going to rely a lot more on those home runs as bringing value. So I like the idea of Santander more than Gunnar, but I think at plus 10,000, throwing a little bit on each of them is a great idea. All right. So now there's a couple cool team specials I saw, and this is on FanDuel. Okay, I'm not sure if DraftKings or anywhere else is having these exact ones or other ones. Really, FanDuel's the only one that I saw these team specials on, and at least I looked at on. So the first one is most likely to me to happen. Not to say it is going to happen, but most likely, and I think there's some good value on it. That's for all three of Gunnar, Santander, and Adley to all hit 30 home runs last year, okay? Or, excuse me, 30 home runs this year. Priced at plus 2,200, all three have to get to the 30 home run mark. Now, Santander did that 2 years ago, missed out by a couple home runs last year. Gunnar missed out on a few home runs last year also. Adley hasn't really been close to 30, but again, I think he can take those strides. And this spring, it's looking like he's been hitting bombs, especially a couple bombs late into spring. And we know his first at-bat started with a bomb. It kind of, I could see all of these guys coming into their own, but Adley coming into his own either as a top-notch on-base guy and contact hitter, like that lead league in hits, or in his power. And really, I think his power is going to show this year. And I know he had a stretch last year where his power looked like it disappeared. It might have been after the home run derby where he batted on both sides and then got robbed in the first round, which sucks, but put on a hell of a show. But I know he had a stretch where he didn't hit a lot of home runs or any home runs. I could see that changing and him not having those long stretches without home runs this year. And that's why I love the idea that all three of those guys could get themselves to that 30 plus. I really love the idea of Gunnar and Santander getting there, and I'll touch on that in a minute. The idea of all three at plus 2,200, not great value, but something interesting I thought was cool. The next one is a little less likely to me, and that's Corbin Burns getting 250 plus strikeouts, and Gunnar Henderson getting 40 plus home runs, okay? I'm not confident in either of those hitting. It's priced at plus 3,100, and Burns, to me, hasn't ever gotten to 250. I know that for a fact, and I don't know if he's going to hit 250 this year, okay? I'm not fully confident that he's going to get even right near it. Gunnar, I think, has a better chance at 40 than Burns does at 250, but I think both are an outside shot. At plus 3,100, though, it's interesting enough to me to mention it and maybe to sprinkle something on it. The last team special is for Gunnar to have 50 home runs and Santander to have 40 home runs, okay? I don't necessarily see either happening. I think Santander at 40 has a lot more likely of a chance than Gunnar at 50. But it's not the craziest thing in the world. Listen, we play it. Still in a hitter's park, especially for lefties. Boston, New York, short porches in right. The new modified Blue Jay Stadium seems like a good stadium to hit home runs in from everything I've seen. Tampa still has that little crap stadium that seems to be good to hit home runs in. Like, Gunnar is this type of guy who could absolutely break out for 50 plus, crazy enough. And I love the idea that Santander can get himself up in those 40s. And at plus 10,000 for that to happen, I love the idea of it. Now, I don't think that they'd offer a cash out on any of those team specials. Typically, I feel like they don't offer cash outs on those kind of bets. But again, that's up to them. That's not something I can know for sure. Okay, but at plus 10,000, I love that idea. Gunnar 50, Santander 40. And listen, they just hit bombs this year, man. Certainly possible. And frankly, if you take the first one I talked about, really, you could hit all three. You start checking them off. If Gunnar gets to 30 and Santander gets to 30, then you just need Adley to get to 30 to check that one off. Then if Gunnar can get to 40 and Burns gets to 250, you check that one off. And then if Gunnar gets to 50 and Santander gets to 40, you can check that last one off. So it's something fun to kind of root for and watch these stats compile over the season, especially if they start trending in a good direction, right? Then it starts getting exciting. Okay? So then, if we just look at the home run market for individual players, right? Not leading the league, just individually, okay? I want to highlight three guys, okay? Basically, the three guys that we were just talking about in that first bet, where Santander, Gunnar, and Adley, okay? So Santander especially, I think, has a great market. His over-under for home runs is only 27.5 at minus 113. So you need 28 home runs or more to get there. I want to believe Tony Taters is a 30-plus home run guy, right? In which case, then the 30-plus pays you out 124, plus 124 for Santander to hit 30 or more home runs this season. So then if you take him 40-plus home runs, plus 520, right? So I'm pretty confident that he's going to get to that 30 mark. I don't know if he can push into the 40s, but Anthony Santander feels like a guy who absolutely could have at least one, if not a couple years, where he's in that 40-50 range, right? And then if we go 50, it's plus 1,500. So it's not the craziest, but again, you start checking one off. If you can get the over, okay, now you got back some of your money. You get the 30, now you're at most of your money. If you get the 40, now you're in the profit. And then you hit the 50, now you're in great profit. And that's if you bet the same amount. If you de-escalate the bet size for the larger amounts, then you could be in the money after just his over 27.5, if not 30 plus. Okay, so when you look at the odds also for Gunnar Henderson, they are all the same. Now, I mentioned in the leading the league in home runs, I think Santander has a better chance at that than Gunnar. Simply, again, because his game revolves more around hitting that home run than Gunnar's game revolves around hitting that home run and relies on hitting that home run. Gunnar's a better all-around player. So, naturally, I think Santander's lines are a better bet than Gunnar's lines. But all of them, the over 27.5, the 30-plus line, the 40-plus line, the 50-plus line, all the same for Gunnar Henderson, okay? All bets I like. Now, if we look at Adley Rutschman, his over is only 20.5 with home runs, okay? Minus 113. I want to peg that in as a lock. I really do. Could I see the reality, okay, if I play devil's advocate, could I see the reality where Adley Rutschman has a down swing in home runs, even if he has a great year offensively, only hits like 12, 13 home runs? Yeah, I weirdly could. These catchers sometimes have those type of years. I personally believe Adley Rutschman is such a different level of player and catcher and just such a historically special player when it's all said and done. I don't think that's going to happen to Adley. To which, I think he goes the other way. Just like I said with that bet with him, Gunnar, Santander, and himself at all hitting 30 plus, I could see him not only getting his over 20.5 at minus 113, getting to that 30 plus at plus 340, and also 40 plus in play at plus 1200. I don't know if he's able to break 30 this year, let alone 40. I think maybe in the future it's coming. But it's interesting enough to me that if I'm believing in these guys, that I should take them individually along with the package of all of them. So now, the last market we're going to talk about on this episode, I appreciate you guys sticking with me. I hope it hasn't been too confusing, too overwhelming. But this is the last market we're going to talk about, and that is the individual pitchers' strikeouts. Okay, we're going to highlight two guys. Corbin Burns is the first one. 200 plus, which is his over-under, okay, is minus 118. Or I'm pretty sure, yes, his over-under is right at that 200. I think it's 200.5, if I remember properly. So while that might be minus 113 or 15, I'd rather pay the extra juice, a couple dollars, to just make that an even 200, personally. And on other markets, it might even be higher. So that 200 plus is nice at a little over even money, or a little under even money. You also can take him for that 250 plus strikeouts at plus 480. Again, I'm not the biggest believer that he's going to get to that 250, even if I believe he's going to be one of the top Cy Young guys. But still, it's certainly possible for him to be playing all these guys that haven't really faced him much, that maybe he gets those strikeouts up a little bit, because he's been close to 250. He just hasn't eclipsed that 250. So because of that, at plus 480, it's interesting. It's something I might sprinkle on, but it's not my favorite, right? We're going to get to Grayson Rodriguez, though, who is my favorite when it comes to this market. His over-under is only at 172.5. And while I think that's probably a lock to go over, I don't think that that's where the value lies. Because, again, at minus 113, it's pretty much paying even money, and it's just not the best bet to me. Is if you believe in Grayson Rodriguez to take that next step, I think you're better to go 200 plus strikeouts at plus 300. Now, yes, there's a wide margin between 173 and 200. So he can certainly fall in the middle there, hit his over, and not get near that 200 for you. I just think with the extra juice, plus 300 on the 200 plus Ks, I think that that's a cooler bet, a better bet to have, because if he does take that step up, 200 should be relatively easy for him. In fact, I think 200 might even be low for him. And that's why I'm going to advocate, the last bet I'm going to talk about is 250 plus strikeouts for Grayson Rodriguez. Heck, we talked about him leading the league in strikeouts at plus 8,000 because he has that stuff, right? He's taken these next steps. He's coming into his eliteness. Well, this may be the last time that you have value this good on Grayson Rodriguez to get 250 plus strikeouts. And if he's going to lead the league in strikeouts and you're betting that, you might as well also bet 250 plus because it's at plus 1060. So you can make sure you cash that. If he's racing another guy or two for the top of the league lead, you don't need to rely on him winning that race to still make a profit off of that Grayson Rodriguez market. And frankly, if you also have him Cy Young, all of that's going to become even cooler to watch, right? So that was the gambling episode, guys. I'm going to wrap it on that. I really tried to break it down. Now, a lot of people could say I literally just went down and wrote down every single possible Orioles bet this season. And they'd be wrong. There are plenty out there that I didn't write down. There are plenty of league lead categories and team specials and all sorts of stuff that I didn't touch because I didn't think there was value in it. But yeah, I have an overwhelming possibly amount of bets that I talked about. Like I said, 40, close to maybe even 50 in total. Okay. Overall, I'm not recommending you go out and bet any of these, let alone definitely not all of these. If you have the spare money and you love what I said and you're confident, throw some money on it. But I promise you, if you're betting these bets, you're best off betting those beginning ones, the win total, the 90 plus, 100 plus wins, making playoffs, the 1 seed, the division, the ALCS, pennant, World Series, best record in baseball. Those kind of bets are much better of a bet than any of these individual player bets. However, I think there's a lot of money to be made on this sheet, right? And we can revisit it after the season. And you guys can call me out. If I go over or if I absolutely get murdered, I hit that win total, but I don't hit anything else, you can call me out and say, this is the worst advice anyone could have given. I don't see that being the case. Hasn't been the case in the past. Hasn't been the case recent past. And definitely hasn't been the case the last year. So I'm very optimistic. I'm a huge believer, obviously, in these Orioles. And I think a lot of these are going to hit. And I hope to make a lot of money off it. And I hope to make you guys a lot of money off it. I hope in a year, when I go to opening day in a year, you guys are coming up to me talking about how much money I made you off of this episode. Because I promise there is money. There's money in here. There's money to be made this season. And you just have to bet it, sit back, and watch and enjoy. Because these Orioles are coming for a lot of these games. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. I appreciate you sticking with me. I love that episode. I love gambling. I love sports betting especially. And I love nothing more than when my Orioles love lines up with my love for sports betting. And we're in the majestic time, gang. This may be the last year you get real value on the Baltimore Orioles. Because let me tell you, if they pretty much sweep out those first 10 plays, I mean, there's no stopping them now. And if they win a couple of these awards, man, there's no stopping them at that point. There's no hiding anymore. Everyone's going to know it's out there. And they may hit, but they're not going to pay out nearly as much as they will this year. So with that being said, gang, that's going to do a wrap. This was the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast, the gambling episode. Let's go, O's!